I'm so excited. This is about this next item. Our next item is a proposed Title 15 amendment about data center and on-site power generation facilities.
I thought you were just excited to hear from the lawyer for
I am.
everybody's favorite part. I think this is just as simple as the last one. Maybe not. This is a proposed zoning text amendment for Title 15 related to data centers. So there's a company named Volition Industries who wants to put a data center inside of Spanish Fork City. In order to do that, there needs to be amendments to Title 15 in order to allow them to do that. Volition's not the first data center that's tried to come into the city. They're the first company that's made it this far. The others have been deterred for one reason or another with the process and with their options or what they were trying to propose. This company has gone a little bit further with respect to all of those aspects, and they've actually prepared and submitted proposed amendments to our code. There's 3 different sections where this comes. Based off of their submission, we then took their proposal and we vetted through that. We went through all of those details. We looked through what we thought made sense. And so you can see, as this is up there in front of you on the screen, anything that's there in blue is their amendment. And as we scroll through some of these amendments, you'll see the red. Those were changes that we made with respect to their proposal. So the first thing is definitions. There's 5 definitions that are key when it comes to a data center that Volition is recommending or proposing, and that our code would need to change in order to allow. And we have gone through these definitions, and there's 4 of them, and all of them are important with respect to what their proposal is. So the key, I mean, we've got a data center that's there defined, but with these data centers that we're talking about, there's 2 important aspects. There's this energy storage system, there's an ultra-low emission generation technology, and on-site power generation facility. So essentially, their proposal is that all of the power be generated on-site, that they not connect to our grid essentially at all. And so these definitions are what make sure that they follow through with that, right? That if we allow this as they're proposing, then they wouldn't be connected to our grid for any of that data system. And then, so those are the definitions. Then we move to the second section, which is it's the light industrial zone. And of course, with zoning uses, we have permitted uses, we have conditional uses, and we have uses subject to conditions. Their proposal was that they would have a conditional use permit. Our changes are that these would be uses subject to conditions. And that way we outline those conditions beforehand so that they're not arbitrary and it's not on a whim every time that somebody tries to come and do that. But we limit those conditions to very specific things. And if they meet those conditions, then they could be allowed to have a data center inside of the city. So there's 2 uses there you can see that would be subject to uses subject to conditions. That's a data center with on-site power generation facility and an on-site power generation facility that wasn't a data center. So any kind of data center that doesn't have their own on-site power generation facility, doesn't meet that definition, would not be allowed inside of the city under this proposal. Any questions about that? Uses subject to conditions. And then the third one are these regulations, and you can look through those regulations. Hopefully you've been through some of those, but this is all related to on-site power generation facilities. It talks about the purpose, where these apply. It's an I-1 zone. The technology that's related, and that really relates to the emission generation, the ultra-low emission generation technology.
I have a question. Is it okay?
Sure. I may not be able to answer it. Some of these questions may have to go to the applicant, but you can ask me and I'll tell you.
Okay. We did specify ultra-low emissions technology. If for some reason that's not employed, do we restrict non-ultra low emissions technology? I'm going to be specific with something I'm thinking. If for some reason they're unable to power it at the capacity they're looking at, they want to roll in a diesel generator, which can provide the power, are we explicitly restricting that?
It is excluded. If it is not ultra-low emission generation technology, it's not allowed.
Okay. And so based on basically our definition of what ultra-low, which looks like it aligns up with what we're getting from, or what's in the proposal.
Right, so based off the definition, based off of what's in our code, and it's my understanding that they're even potentially going to enter into a development agreement to agree to all of these things as well. So we'll have a contractual agreement
Okay.
potentially with them, that if they don't follow through, we have contractual remedies that are a lot easier to enforce than code violations, so
Okay.
to speak. So
Yeah, and I
that's my
just,
understanding. The applicants can speak to that, but.
and we'll ask about that. I think the reason I bring that comment is there are all sorts of supply chain issues when it comes to data centers. And sometimes, certain hardware cannot be obtained, and there's competition for that at all levels. And so that is sort of a stopgap that I think is materially different from what's being presented here. And I just want to make sure that we're clear on that language.
That makes sense to me. I don't know anything about the supply chain of how data centers. So.
If you wonder why anything electronic is so expensive.
Sure. It makes sense, like
Yeah.
I said.
Yeah.
And then a few of the other things that are included in these conditions, again, electrical isolation, they're not going to be connected to the grid. Of course, they could choose to connect just their office and maintenance custodial stuff. We added that in case they wanted to, but everything else is for the data center energy production that's completely separate from the grid. There's conditions here related to noise, related to air quality, related to setbacks, screening and height, even related to the water use, wastewater discharge, even once they're finished, the decommissioning, right? What happens after they're all the way done? There's conditions here that are in force or in effect under this proposal, and then everything else is based off the other codes that we have.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
And I am sure that this has been asked, but on number 5, with the electrical isolation, with the red text that says ordinary office maintenance, custodial, other portions, is there any way to use that as a loophole to?
No, so it's my understanding that the city would require them to produce their system plans, and it would show a separation between the two, that there's no way there would be any kind of crossover
Show
between
separation.
what the city is providing to these minimal things, the office maintenance, custodial, similar portions of the facility versus the data generation. And so they would have to have, if they want to connect to the city grid for those things, there would be a total separation between, there'd be no crossover, I guess,
Okay.
between the two. That's
Thank
my
you.
understanding what we'd require
Thank you.
under this code. And that way they'd be paying for city power for the limited portion if they wanted to do that, right?
Okay.
And then, of course, the last one is sort of the catch-all, which is all the other code sections in the city still apply, right? And so unless it's trumped by these things, so.
One more question on the last section with wastewater discharge.
Sure.
I know we're talking in the proposal about having a closed-loop cooling system.
Right.
Listened last night for Hundex, and they said, if there's any concern, there's certain, it would not necessarily be discharged into the city water supply. Is that excluded here? Because it actually sounds like it's not excluded here.
So it's my understanding based off of this code that it is possible that they would discharge the public sewer system, but if they did, they have to comply with the city's every other pre-treatment aspects under the code.
Yeah. So they do have, so as it's written, they have the option to discharge in our sewer, the public sewer.
Under these conditions, that yes, there's not a condition that restricts so that no discharge is made into our waste.
Okay.
Yeah, so those are the conditions that a data center would have to follow. If they met all of those conditions in the proposal and we pass this, then they would be entitled to approval, or that would be a permitted use inside of the I-1 zone, and inside of the I-1 zone only.
How would that be monitored, the wastewater discharge? How would we monitor that? How would the city monitor that? Do they have a way?
I'm not an expert in wastewater management. Maybe Byron would know how we would monitor that.
As far as flow, you'd have to put a specific flow meter in there, which we typically don't do. But as far as testing and stuff, the pre-treatment usually has a sampling manhole where you can go down and sample. So we would have the capability of taking samples as often as we felt like we wanted to. Flow, if we were extremely concerned about that, there are flow meters you can put in there. It's not typical, but it's possible.
You can trace illicit discharges, right? Like through the system, that type of thing. Understood that. You could track somebody down if they were, like if.
Certain chemicals were in the water when it hit the
Yeah,
plant.
typically we go to those sampling manholes and sample them and see what's in there. Yeah.
Okay. But to my understanding, they're not going to be a lot of discharge, right?
That's a great question to ask the applicant,
Yeah.
I think. So.
So that's the proposal with respect to the Title 15 amendments. Are there any other question for me?
I want, maybe an and I know you asked for the question before, I didn't ask this. If you're moving from, conditional use permit to, basically if you meet these conditions, that basically says this applicant, any other applicant, as long as they meet all those conditions, we wouldn't have any public hearing or anything like that. It would essentially be an administrative action, no requirement from a legislative perspective, no planning commission that would actually comment on it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And why would you do that when that conditional use rather than subject to conditions?
So it's legally, you're in a much better position to defend the decision when you have the conditions outlined beforehand, all set out directly like these ones are, versus having a planning commission review and come up with their conditions sort of
Arbitrarily?
arbitrarily. I didn't want to say that, but yeah, arbitrarily compared to these conditions that are in place. So it's best if we come up with the conditions beforehand, set them out just like we do in many, many other instances in our code, right? We have uses subject to conditions where we set out all of those conditions beforehand and we keep those conditions pretty tight, right? In my mind, these conditions are very tight. And there are review of those things. We tried to keep it that way so that it was very limited in what could ever come in terms of a data center. But the idea is you keep those conditions tight and defensible, and so you're in a good foundation if you were ever to try to deny someone who is applying to put a data center in. If you have a conditional use permit and it comes before the planning commission, and you come up with any kind of condition that is not defensible or is a little arbitrary, where we find ourselves in the middle of a lawsuit, right?
Gotcha. That makes
condition.
sense. I
So
appreciate.
it's not that we don't trust the planning commission at all. We do, and we appreciate your input.
But we're not professionals.
But when it comes to defending that sort of foundational position, we're in a better legal position if we do uses subject to condition.
With something like this, that sounds like it's an important thing to do.
That's how we feel.
It also, it seems like this is really working to protect the citizens of Spanish Fork from big impacts of.
That's the goal. So the applicant can address the impact that they anticipate having better than I can, but it's our understanding based off of what we've studied with respect to this data center and their proposal is that they have it's our understanding that the impact is quite small. There's no effect on the grid, the power grid. The water is minimal. They can address exactly what that is. And the emissions are ultra low emissions. That's the standard that they're going to follow. So
I'm going to ask one thing in terms of power limits. We basically said any power limit is acceptable based on conditions. Is that correct? As long as you're off the grid.
no, so there's a minimum actually instead of a maximum.
A minimum of,
I want to say I can't remember the number. I can find it though. I think it's in red.
50.
Generate a minimum of 50 megawatts.
And no maximum.
There's not a maximum listed.
So it could be, well, I guess I'm just answering, it could be any size. It could be a 2 gigawatt, 4 gigawatt or whatever,
Right.
as long as it was off grid and over 50.
Right. Under this current proposal.
And I know we'll have comments later, but I think even if this is low impact, some limit is, I think, perhaps pertinent here. And I think that's a concern I would have. So I'll just note that.
And you can make so then, I guess next steps, if you're done with questions for me, then the applicant would come up, then you'd have a public hearing, and then your own discussion, and then make a recommendation, whatever your recommendation is for the city council.
Council. Okay. Thank you
Thank you.
very much.
quick introduction. So maybe even a warm up. First of all, I really, really appreciate the work that our legal department has put into this particular issue. Quick high-level observation. That's the result of having worked with this particular applicant now for a number of different months and having been a part of research that's been done by city staff on a level that I haven't seen on any other development-related type of proposal or issue before. And I'll just leave it at that for now, but would be happy to answer any questions that you might have of me. From my perspective as the zoning administrator, I also really appreciate this in terms of its content, its level of specificity and detail, the fact that the different conditions that have to be met before the uses that are contemplated here can happen in Spanish Fork. They're measurable, they can be tracked. This is really, really, in my view, well-suited to consistent monitoring and administration over time. So that being said, just another maybe thought on this is new zoning language. Jeff Chavez is here with us tonight. He represents Volition. Jeff, I'll just let you jump in, make your presentation. If you guys have questions, please don't hold back. We've peppered Jeff with plenty. I think he's very well prepared, and if you have any questions tonight that anybody can't answer, we certainly can track down answers to those questions. So with that, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Good evening. Thank you for having us. Appreciate your late nights. Before I got involved in some of this, I didn't realize how long city council sometimes went. So appreciate the work that you do for communities. I think that some background is appropriate, and I think it will add some context as you consider this proposal. My name is Jeff Chavez. I'm the CEO of Volition. We are a 3-year-old company, kind of 20 years in the making. Previously, I was CEO of a company that focused on water conservation, purification, and clean water generation. I worked directly with Professor Omar Yagi from Berkeley, who is the world's leading water purification and atmospheric water generation scientist in the world. I also worked directly with the University of Limerick in Ireland on their advanced technologies around water. So initially, my work in water conservation and water purification, we're going back into about 2015 or 2016. It was at that time, for the first time, that I began to become aware of the huge amounts of water that these sort of unknown, large, sprawling data centers owned by AWS and others were consuming. At the time, it was under the radar because data volume was nowhere near where it is now. I began to understand that millions of gallons of water were evaporating monthly in these communities. So this was my first kind of insight into a real problem with the way that large data centers, hyperscale data centers, were being built. Shortly thereafter, I began work in renewable energy, the water transition into renewable, and began to do a lot of research and investing in renewable power generation, wind, solar, and other types of systems. In that work, I began to get my first glimpse at the grid restraints and rapidly accelerating residential utility rates, especially in California, where it was moving at 6% a year. And we began to understand that the upgrade needed to the grid was being passed on to consumers. And we also started to recognize that there was about to be a massive increase in requests to build major data centers. So our work initially was on building microgrids, so on-site power generation systems that could help large industrial areas have power on site that would be at a lower cost than the utility and at a fixed rate, so that they could have a better economic scenario, and so that we could begin to create some ease off the grid by providing a kind of parallel on-site power solution. So I think my background has sort of prepared me for what we're doing now, because Volition was created for the purpose of solving the problems that are now really widely visible throughout the US, throughout the world. When we began 3 years ago, it was because we had realized that we could engineer a viable solution to the problems that large hyperscale data centers had created. Oh, do I have a...
Oh, to advance?
Clicker.
Oh, clicker, sorry.
That's, yeah, you can just move it along for me. We'll go back one. So, oh, thank you. Oop. So the primary concerns with data centers that we became really aware of, and now everybody is aware of, and I think that's a good thing, it's questions around the use of electricity, water, noise, air quality, and we have made, from the time that we began, an initiative to be extremely transparent about those problems and how we can effectively address those problems. So a big part of our company is transparency, and I think Spanish Fork and our approach here has been a demonstration of how we're doing that. We began working with Spanish Fork about maybe 8 months ago in initial conversations. Seems like this might not be going. Let's try. I think this might be.
Yeah, just holler.
Yeah, so let's stop here for a moment. To that end, we officially kind of came out into the marketplace several months ago and began just a proactive communication with Utah County in particular. Let me give you just a quick look at some of how we're introducing ourselves and then tell you a little bit about the feedback we're beginning to get. So I think if you click on that, it'll play a very short video. We didn't set out to build data centers. We began by looking for ways to reduce energy costs in communities across America. We realized soon after there was a better way to build data centers that worked for the community. That's our mission. We all know that there's no stopping our need for additional data. Data centers are going to be built whether we're comfortable with that or not. But growth at all costs can have a negative impact on communities. Data centers are dramatically stressing our grid. In many cases, they use huge amounts of excess water, and most of them are not low emission. Our data centers are different. We don't require a huge amount of land, and most importantly, we never touch the electric grid. We use no power from the local utility. Everything we build is based on our natural gas infrastructure with a fuel cell that runs with extremely low emissions. We use the same water over and over again. What's more, all of the technology we use on our properties are extremely quiet. We can do this better. giving back and sharing resources with the community is at the center of our purpose. A share of every site's revenue flows straight back into the community that hosts it. At Volition, we've made a commitment to be a good neighbor. And that's a promise we'll keep. So if we go back to the slide. This has allowed us to begin to get some feedback. Certainly, there's a lot of feedback that's knee-jerk, and that's okay, because these are real topics that we should be tackling head-on. In that spirit, prior to any final approval that could occur here in Spanish Fork, we're taking a different approach on an open house setting. We're running 3 of them at the end of next week here at the library, 2 hours each, so that we allow for real dialogue with anybody who wants to come and have a dialogue with us or express their opposition. That's fine. There won't be an argument. We'll just be sharing our engineering and our process. So I think that will be informative also for the city to understand more of the community's feedback. Our hope is that we will just have a good opportunity to educate on what we're actually doing. So let me take you through just a couple slides that will outline the key topics. So when we look at a data center in Spanish Fork, there are really 5 key pillars of our approach. One, that we genuinely bring our own power. We will never touch the grid. We have near 0 emissions in the technology that we utilize. We utilize an extremely small amount of water, and while I'll come to this, there is no disposal of the water at any time. So there is no scenario where we are offloading water, and I'll touch a little bit more on that. We believe that we've identified a building where this is an extremely useful repurposing of an existing building, and we do believe that by being here, there's a meaningful economic and educational impact in the community. So if we can go to the next slide. The fuel cell that we use, and this is, I'll be talking a little bit more about it. It uses natural gas. There is never at any time a need to connect to the grid. There will never be a future request. Our whole business is built around natural gas technology. There is no time in our scenario where we have an interest in or a request for utility power. It's just not the way that we operate.
Can I pause you right there? Where does your natural gas come from?
So our natural gas, we purchase directly through Enbridge, and we upgrade the amount of natural gas coming in. I'll be talking also a little bit more about that specifically.
Okay.
But we upgrade the infrastructure at our cost to the property.
Thank you.
There is never a time, Paul, where we will introduce any diesel generators or backup. So we build our system in a way that it has its own backup redundancy in it. So it's called N+1. So if we're producing X amount of power, we have on site another backup scenario with the same technology if something goes down. But our proposed amendment also precludes any use of diesel. There is no scenario where we will ever use diesel on our property. Back just one real quick. So I didn't realize, Shauna, that so on this third point, so Enbridge, we negotiate our own rate with Enbridge. We've had approval now for their engineering. If we move forward, they have already provided us with the engineering to accomplish that in about 8 months to open up the natural gas pipe so that we have all the natural gas there that we need. So if we'll go to this, the fuel cell is dynamic, and these began in operation over 25 years ago. They were really kind of ahead of their time. They are now proven to the point that they are now providing a great solution for our time. Bloom Energy is really the leader in this technology, and effectively what occurs is that natural gas comes into the fuel cell and there's a chemical reaction that occurs. That chemical reaction produces electricity, but the natural gas is never consumed. There is no burning, there is no ignition. The byproduct is electricity, and it is heat, and it is a very small amount of pure water that is produced by the system. There was a great question, Paul, about supply chain, and Bloom is now the popular tool to be used. And they do have a supply chain shortage pending. Thankfully, we have a 4 to 5 year relationship with them. All of our inventory is already secured. We also have relationships with every other major fuel cell manufacturer in the world. There are not a lot of them, but there are 4 or 5 of them. We're also in line with them for any backup equipment that we would need. All of them meet our sustainability requirements if we were ever to have to use something other than Bloom.
So I'll make a comment on it. I get what you're saying, you have those relationships. I know who you're competing against. You're competing against Oracle, who just in New Mexico, April 26th, switched over from their plans to do on-grid electricity to this as a solution because New Mexico had concerns about emissions. Rightfully so.
Yeah.
Oracle has a deal with OpenAI for a very large commit. In fact, if you follow Oracle's stock, tightly related there.
Yeah.
And I'll just make this comment. I don't speak for my employer or anything like that, but I am in the tech industry. I work for Adobe, but in no way do I speak for them at all.
Yeah.
I am intimately aware of the supply chain issues. Everybody has them. The big boys have them.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the little players have them. The Microsofts of the world have them. Even Elon Musk himself has them. And you're in a realm where you're competing there. When I say that, I'm saying you're competing in a world that is entirely changed. This is all from GPU consumption, which is entirely different than the data center problem you were talking about before. The reason why I even bring that up is I say, I think you're going to run into problems. And it's not because of your ability to execute on that. It's just because this is the market and world we live in. There is such a voracious appetite for generative AI that is a huge concern there. So anyway, that's even why I bring that up.
No,
so I could
great.
go on forever, but I'm sure you're intimately aware of these details.
Yeah, these are called long lead items, and so we have identified access to everything that we need on the property, and this fuel cell is already secured.
Already secured in terms of you've secured actual inventory, you have delivery dates and things like that?
MOU security on the amount that we need and with our client. So there's a deep history between us, Bloom, Oracle, all working together, and we just happen to thankfully have access to all the inventory that we need. We also have identified...
So is Oracle your client?
No, not in this property. Not on this property.
Who's the client for this? Well, I think I heard yesterday, Nscale, is that correct?
Yeah, most likely Nscale.
And are they reselling that to yet another, like another?
Yeah, they'll have a large brand that rents space in the facility. So supply chain, thankfully, we have a really good handle on, and we have great relationships, and that all factors into our ability to build out the project. But I think what's important is that a slowdown in supply chain does not equal a change in our engineering. It just means that where we anticipate having something done in the middle of 2027, it could be done in the middle of 28 if there was a major supply chain issue. But there's no switching engineering because this is the only way we build.
I know we'll go back and forth on some questions. I want to catch one thing before we go forward. Yeah. Low emissions, it's not zero emissions. We're still talking.
I didn't say zero emissions.
Yeah, you're still talking specific. CO2 greenhouse emissions.
Yeah, we'll get
correct?
to that I'll walk you right through it.
We'll continue
we're really careful to never say zero emissions because we're not. So let's head to next slide. So on emissions, to give an idea of the way natural gas operates, we end up emitting ultra-low emissions that fall below any state or municipal standard anywhere in the country, especially in particular in California, where it's most stringent. Bloom operates there, and so we meet and exceed every emission requirement. To give a little bit of just day-to-day context, for example, in the property that we propose to work, our entire development will be equal to about 4 to 5 semi-trucks per year. So if in that building, instead of data center, we just had 4 diesel trucks running routes, that's about the amount of emission that our entire system puts out. And we've just recently received what's called the new minor source permit in the state of Utah. So they have finished all of their analysis, not of the fuel cell standalone, but the cumulative construction of our project. And again, we've been approved meeting all of those standards. The next slide, I think, actually gives us a little bit more detail as another comparison. So in this location, you can see that all of the key particulates and emissions, for example, if we are at 5 tons a year compared to a natural gas turbine, a diesel generator, a Utah grid, average reciprocating engines, all of these tools that have been used on industrial facilities and on data centers all throughout the US are emitting 1,000 times plus more emissions than anything that we have on site. So while we are not zero emission, we are ultra low emission unequivocally.
What time frame are we looking at? Is this a year?
Per year.
A year emissions?
Yeah, per year. Next slide. Water is my background. Water is something I've always been passionate about. And some time ago, companies like Train and Carrier began to innovate and engineer, just like Bloom began to innovate a better way to produce energy. The cooling companies began really innovating on how to do this better. We now, over the last 5 years, have access to a closed loop system that means that we fill the system one time. In this property, the initial fill is 500,000 gallons. That is the same amount as 2 average Utah households per year. And we only do that once. We fill it once. Annually, we use 250,000 gallons for a part of the process that has to do with just creating humidity in part of the technology. So you're talking about an annual use of about one home. Everything that we use falls far below what is currently permitted on this property. There's already a 4-inch pipe. We will never touch the amount of water that is already allocated. We will never request any additional water rights. And so this is a fact that is a little bit blurred in media right now, because most of the conversations are referencing technologies that are totally different than this, or that are much older. And so this is the facts of our system. Let me give you just kind of a logical, thought on that. If we are investing huge amounts of capital to build this system, but think that we could then get away with a bait and switch and say, well, wait a minute, we need more water. There is no scenario where we or our capital partners would ever take a risk like that. We have designed this so that what you see here is exactly what it does. From the standpoint of any water being dispelled, there is no scenario where we are offloading water. The only time that we would ever offload water is if we detected through our daily monitoring that maybe there was some bacteria in our system. We can't have that because it will degrade the quality of our system. And so these systems are built in such a way that you're able to close off sections, and when you remove water, you're pumping it into a tank, then treating from that point, testing your water, finding out if you have to refill the whole thing or if you can update and improve that water so that you can reuse it. So I just wanted to address the questions about water and the technicalities. Even if we were in a scenario where we had to test water, 2 households of water, it would never be released into the local system.
Can I ask a question? And I think I heard that, and I think it's a pretty compelling story here in terms of water consumption. I think the reason you run into other issues is similar to what you said, right? AWS in different locations, water's a different situation. Could you maybe, and it doesn't have to be forever, but could you dive into the details of how this actually works? How is the water actually cooling the infrastructure, the servers and everything like that? I know you're saying a closed loop system. Give me like a
the short version is
version.
You think of maybe a radiator in your car. So we have water that is coming from a cooling system. So we have water moving through cooling. And that cooler water then hits the computer that has been running and gets very hot. And it's called direct to chip. So the water actually flows over the chip itself. That water cools the chip and is now a warm, hot water coming out the back end. It loops around, comes back through the cooling system, comes down to another, several degrees cooler into the 70s, 60s or 70s, and it comes back through. And that is literally the very basic version of how the system flows and cools.
Same water recycled over and over again.
Over and over again.
So you have to cool this water. You do that with some sort of refrigeration device that requires energy. Is that correct?
Yeah, so all of the power that we have on the system, on the property, is also powering those cooling systems by carrier and train.
Gotcha. What portion of your, let's say 250 megawatt facility, what portion of that is committed to cooling? And maybe this is too technical. I'm just kind of curious on that.
So that would be considered, there's about 25% of all of the power you use on the facility that is called parasitic use. So that powers IT, that powers cooling. So that's about a rough number.
Rough number.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's go to the building. And so this is where we get into the land use. So this is proposed at what is known as the old Finger Hut building. It's 1 million square feet. And it is in a pretty ideal scenario where we're not requesting to, buy up a bunch of land and build something new on the skyline. And the exterior allows us to utilize that in an efficient way with the power that would be on site, primarily on what would be the east side of the property. So let's go to another slide where we get into this a little bit further. This is an important comparison about the use of this property. So we are buying this building, and we also know that there is another company bidding to buy the building. We won't buy the building until we know if we're moving forward together, but all of that is in place. And but of note, this building is built for distribution. There's 36 loading bays. For sure, the other buyer would be utilizing this at its full capacity for distribution. That means 3,500 trucks a month running out of this facility. Massive amount of emissions coming just when we calculate those trucks running from the facility just out of Spanish Fork to the freeway. In our case, we will have 100 or 200 employees coming in and out of that building. There's no delivery, there's no heavy diesel, and we are dramatically cleaner and quieter than the proposed use that will likely happen when this building sells if it's not to us. So we think it is genuinely a more effective use of this facility. If we go to the next slide, when we're completed in this building, what we have is equipment that is extremely quiet. What I failed to tell you about the Bloom fuel cell is its lack of noise. And the way to compare it is, if you all remember the first time you ever had like a Tesla or a Prius pull up, and it's like, I didn't even hear that thing. Still kind of weirds me out. When you stand near the Bloom fuel cell, it's the same thing. It is, you just don't, you hear a very, very low, it's not even a hum, it's just like a super quiet fan. So all of the equipment is under 65 decibels, that's conversational level. As soon as you start to pull away from it, you drop below that. We have no light pollution. We have no change to the skyline with a new structure. And very uniquely, this building will house over $4 billion of equipment that creates, if we look on the next slide, a really substantial impact to the community. What's also important to note is that we have zero request of this community. There is no request for a tax incentive. There is no request to participate in our infrastructure. We are making no request. Our business model stands on its own. There are some federal incentives that we're able to write off in the normal course of business, and we'll pay taxes in the state of Utah normally.
Yeah, I have a question about this, and I'm not super familiar here, and I may even ask staff to comment. Whoever can comment can. If we had a different tenant, would their bill be the same for taxes?
Property taxes are based on property value, and it's impossible, frankly, I think, for you to be talking about these kind of values unless you're talking about, I've come to know them as GPUs, a lot of them in a compact space like this.
So the actual value of the capital investment is what drives tax, is what can drive the tax. So the capital investment is going to be the servers, the infrastructure, the network switches, the so on and so forth.
As well as the real estate itself. So you have personal property tax and the real estate. And particularly with the personal property, you know, there's
generators.
Man, the phrase has now left me. The equipment there's depreciation.
Yeah.
But with this equipment, it gets replaced so frequently.
Well, it has to.
Really
you have about
don't.
a 5-year depreciation cycle, and then this stuff is essentially ancient.
And then it
right?
gets replaced, right? So
Yeah.
you typically hold that value pretty strongly compared to some other types of equipment that you might see in a situation like this. So to be candid, this is a strong performer for a municipality in terms of revenue generation.
Okay, based on capital investment. Okay, thanks for that understanding. That's one thing.
Is that'll be the only revenue generator, is the property tax? There won't be
In this case, where they
sales tax?
They won't be purchasing power, there's no sales tax. Yep, it's just property tax.
On the next slide, you'll see that our intention is to also directly contribute to the community. So aside from the tax revenue, we're allocating a minimum of $500,000 a year. We'll probably push over $1 million because we'll ask our tenant to contribute with us. That will be a contribution to the community for whatever beneficial use is appropriate. We will be hosting ongoing quarterly professional training in the community so that we can help professionals understand how to transition if they need to, or to just step up into an IT or data center related career. We will provide this training to the high school level, the university level. There's a long history of learning and development in our executive team, and so this is something that's genuinely part of our DNA. And in addition to that, direct contribution on the next page, or the next slide, we proactively will be proposing our development agreement that holds us accountable to everything that we've discussed. Our water use cap, no grid connection request at any time, a decommissioning plan that illustrates how we would utilize the building or decommission if there was a major economic change, enforceable noise limits, an absolute covenant for no diesel generation, and an annual public reporting on all of these covenants that we will make with the city of Spanish Fork. So, we think that this is a genuine net positive to the community. We've gone to great lengths to ensure that wherever we build a data center, our intention is that the city forgets or never knows that it's even there, because we operate sustainably and efficiently. We would love to do this project here. With that said, we're looking at other places also, and we've gone as far as we can to bring this then, to the city's final decision about moving forward together or not. And we fully respect the outcome. And I would say that, our process of working with the city of Spanish Fork has been really phenomenal. I live in Provo, and we intend to headquarter here in this building if we move forward with this project. But it's been a pleasure working with the city all the way through, so thank you.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes,
Just
sir.
2 slides back, it talked about local hiring. What kind of a workforce would you have on this facility?
So in the construction, it's impossible to man this facility all locally. While it's being built, we'll see trades on this property, in excess of 1,000 people. We work with local contractors and engineers who are able to pull from the state of Utah first. So there's call it a 24-month window of construction. The first delivery of about 25 megawatts would be scheduled for almost exactly a year from now. And then it would build into the end of 2028. So absolutely, any tradespeople in Spanish Fork, they'll have a job here for 2+ years building. Beyond that, we hope to employ those next ongoing, call it 200 people in our building locally as much as if we can find them here, we're going to have them work for us at Volition in that building. They're good jobs. There's nobody in the building that would be earning less than probably $85,000 or $90,000 a year. So it's a good industry to work in. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how the employment path looks. And we don't make a claim to being a huge employment benefit to the community. A lot of data centers say that. I'm not sure why they say that, because at the end of the day, you really don't have a huge staff on premises.
Thank you.
So I've got a lot of questions.
Sure, absolutely.
I hope to not spend forever on this.
No.
But I want to bring up something that that was discussed last night with the city council, just kind of for perspective here. Total power consumption, what I heard, and back me up if this is true, maybe I heard this incorrectly. Total power consumption in the city of Spanish Fork right now, peak usage day, middle of summer, 90 megawatts.
Yeah.
So you will be producing more than 2x the amount of energy that's consumed in the entire city of Spanish Fork.
Yeah, that's right.
And the reason I want to just say that, and that doesn't come from nowhere. Now, the Bloom Energy server that you're talking about, I just did a quick search here. I asked for the largest deployment of that anywhere in the world. Currently, it says, and again, this is just a search result, probably generated in the very same infrastructure that you're talking about building here. We're talking 20 to 80 megawatts, South Korea, and this is for power.
Well, that's just incorrect, though. Bloom has over 500 megawatts running now.
In a single site?
Not in a single site. Yeah, not.
What is the largest single site deployment of this technology?
Their newest one, well, right here at Nova, Bloom and Oracle is the tenant. Bloom is running 50 megawatts there, right here in Utah. So there are large deployments of Bloom happening. And now that they have been in such demand, so Oracle, Anthropic, they're scooping up like a gigawatt of capacity.
Right.
So
nowhere is so 50 is the largest. Now Nova, I looked up Nova last night. They have on-site diesel generation to supplement what they're doing. Now I know you're not talking about doing that.
No, it's not the same design, but I'm saying
I know it's
they
not
have
the same.
daily running Bloom at that facility.
And the reason why I say that is because power is such a difficult thing to get. I mean, that's the reason why you even came into this industry, right? Based on the story, what you just told us, right? But they're adding that on. And I believe that's in West Jordan. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So, to be really clear, what you're asking about doing here is something that has never been done anywhere before, even using that platform at this scale on a single site. Is that correct?
That's true.
So I'm just going to pause and tell you what my concern is about that. My concern is that we've written a Title 15 amendment to accommodate your plan. And the water consumption story, I'm just going to say from my perspective, sounds awesome, right?
Yeah.
I have long showers. I probably consume well more than that average stuff in my household. The energy situation, though, I think is something that is very unsure in terms of what can happen here. The CO2 emissions that you're talking about, those are real. Those may not affect our health. Those may not even be as regulated as much as we're looking at. And with the current administration, there may not be so much concern about that. But the CO2 emissions that you're talking about, I did some numbers here. We can say left and right what's going on, but you're talking about probably 2 or 3x the amount of CO2 emissions that come from everyone driving cars here. Now, CO2 is different than the NOx or the smog considering ones. And I will grant your smog emissions exceptionally low, right? So for air quality, breathability, PM 2.5, you're way better than those cars there. But the CO2 emissions are real. I think the political climate here in Utah is maybe not so concerned about CO2 emissions, but CO2 emissions are greenhouse gases that cause climate change. And that's absolutely something you contribute to. Now that said, and again, I don't mean to just go in one direction.
It's okay.
Am I in the right ballpark when I'm talking about the CO2 emissions there's still something that you do, right? And probably at a volume that would exceed the entire CO2 emissions of everyone in Spanish Fork average driving. I know you probably haven't ran that, so I know I'm putting you on the spot.
I don't know if you want to talk about it, Ryan. This is Ryan Mazzelli from Volition.
Okay.
Hello, Ryan.
Yeah, hi, Ryan Mazzelli, Head of Development. And, okay, so on the max system size, just to quantify this, it's really about capital expenditure.
Mm-hmm.
So when a developer can come in and get approved for a diesel generator, it's much cheaper for them to stand that up than to put, let's say, 50 megawatts of Bloom.
No, I understand. And I understand you're not talking about diesel generators here at all. And
Yeah,
we're talking about including that as an exclusion.
Right. So it's more on the development side of let's try to make this as cheap as possible than make this as environmentally sustainable. So cost over, pollution. So on the CO2, there is no CO2 that is emitted from the system. These are the pollutants that are shown up here. So that's nitrous oxide, carbon monoxide, volatile organic compounds, particulate matter, and sulfuric dioxide. What you can equate these pollutants into CO2 equivalent. So there are multipliers to NOx or carbon monoxide to create a CO2 equivalent of tonnage. So there isn't direct CO2 coming out.
So
These-
can we say this is not contributing at all to greenhouse gases?
No, this is where what you see on the screen here is what the system will be emitting into the air per year.
Could you give me a comparison from your perspective on how these emissions compare to, say, like emissions from something else? Let's just, in values that we can talk about,
Yeah.
right?
Do we have a?
No, I think the comparison is if we were running 3 to 4 trucks out of the facility, it's the same. So,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course, this is not zero emission. This isn't.
3 to 4 trucks of nitrous oxide, right? Or
No, if we had 3 or 4 diesel trucks running in and out of that facility as a delivery service, that's the same amount of emissions our entire system produces.
for CO2,
All emissions.
all emissions.
All emissions. So this is something that is drastically below anything comparable and falls below the state and local requirements. So we're clean. This is a clean design. It's not zero, but it's very clean.
So you're telling me the CO2 would be equivalent to 1 or 2 trucks,
3 or 4 trucks.
3 or 4
so I said, yeah.
trucks, and that's it.
That's right.
So let's take a step back. There's a power generation facility just south of here in Payson. I think we're talking about 120 megawatts for that, right? So you're about twice the size of that. That thing's, I'm not sure on the emission detail there, but to just give a sense, you're 2x that. So I guess the whole point I'm saying is you're generating a lot of energy here
That's right.
that could conceivably power probably more than the entire town. Can you give me a per house comparison to how much energy you're doing? I guess if we said 90 right now for all of Spanish Fork.
Yeah, we're more than double. We're more than double.
So
Paul, my question, I think, to you is just
Go ahead.
the amount of power. I'm not sure how that matters if our system can produce that power and produce it clean. What I would say is that there is no other scenario in Spanish Fork that would ever accommodate, I think, another building like ours. This is about the largest, property in the region. If somebody came along and wanted to do this also, they will have a very hard time finding another location in Spanish Fork that would accommodate this. And any time from this point forward, because of supply chain, they won't even have access to anything until 2028 or 2029.
Yeah,
So
and-
there's not going to be a rush here in Spanish Fork.
And I know I'll question you on the supply chain thing, only because I'm going to go off for a little second here. Elon Musk built the Colossus data center in Tennessee. Are you familiar with how big that is in terms of energy consumption?
Yeah, it has no comparison to us.
It's the exact same size. It's 250 to 300 kilowatts.
Right, but it has no comparison to us. Totally different design.
In terms of its energy consumption, it has no comparison. That's right.
Yeah.
But in terms of its power consumption, it's the same size. So I want to talk about what that looks like. And this is like maybe even just to level set this. And please, everyone, go ask these questions if they're right. But at that size, the actual revenue that they bring in from an Anthropic, I think they were running their own Grok AI that wasn't necessarily popular, right? They switched over to leasing this out to Anthropic. Revenue was $1.5 billion per month for this lease. Now, the reason I bring this up is you are playing in the space that Elon Musk plays in. Elon Musk is the wealthiest person in the world. And I do not say this to be, anything other than like you're competing in that space right now. There's a lot of money that drives this, which is, and this is quite a challenge. I'm saying this is going to be a difficult thing to land with all of these infrastructure concerns, with all of these supply constraint concerns. We give you that opening. The opening might not just be for you, right? The opening might be for whoever else wants to come in here. The other question I would have for you, you say there's supply constraints that could keep others. Are you looking at other parts of town if this were to be open up? The reason I ask that is when I go and consume AWS services, they give me 3 availability zones or 4 availability zones or whatever they are. And what an availability zone matches to is yet another data center that is close close to that data center, right? So I can have multiple availability. Now, we get GPU consumption is different than availability zones. But what you could say is if you were offering the Spanish Fork data center, right, the provided services, you could offer multiple availability zones, which could be in other portions of the town. Is that something that you've considered?
No.
Okay.
I mean, I'm.
But you get what
There was
I'm
a
saying,
property
like,
in Stockman Flats that could work. So we've identified another place that could potentially work on a smaller scale. So I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're asking.
Yeah, I'm just saying if
We see two locations that could work in Spanish Fork.
and you're
this-
considering both of them just for kind of one, or are you considering both of them for us sort of, we do 50% here or 70% here and another 20% here? Is that right?
No, I don't think we're looking at it that way. Regardless of what else is going on in the industry in Elon, none of those things apply to us at all.
No.
We have-
I'm going to take exception.
No,
They do
follow me.
apply.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
They don't apply to us at all in the sense that we currently have more demand than we could fill in the next 10 years. So whatever Elon and everybody else does, it doesn't matter. Volition is carving out its own little niche in the industry. We hope to be a leader in really great design so that we're better output than any of those designs. But what they do and where they do it is irrelevant to
Yeah,
us.
well, I would take exception with what happens in the industry doesn't affect you. It affects all of us. The price of semiconductors,
Well, that's
the
not what
price
I'm
of
saying.
everything.
I'm saying that for our business model and where we intend to go, those other developments we're not concerned about, and we'll manage the supply chain, and if certain things have to be delayed, they're delayed.
What differentiates you from an Oracle? Because Oracle's literally trying to do the same thing, right, in New Mexico, right?
Oracle is a massive software company. We are not.
They're also a hyperscaler,
That's right.
and they've been
we're
doing that
not.
for a decade.
Right, and we're not a hyperscaler.
They're a hyperscaler like Microsoft or AWS.
Right, and we're not that.
I mean, not quite at the level, right?
Yeah, we're just a little company.
Well, how do you as a little company succeed in this? Because you are playing with all the big players.
Yeah, we'll do fine.
Okay,
Yeah,
I have a question.
We'll do fine.
This goes along with this. One is, how many data centers do you have? It's kind of two. How many do you have? How big are they compared to what you're proposing? And what hangups have you had and how have you resolved them? That's three questions, I
Yeah.
guess.
So Volition as a brand, this is the first data center as a brand. Our team has built over 500 megawatts of data centers, and our team is the same team that just finished the Nova data center here. That's all the same closed loop, direct-to-chip cooling, big deconstruction, spectrum engineering. Those are all our extended team. So we have a world-class team of contractors and developers and engineers and supply chain experts. Hunt Electric happens to be one of the greatest kind of supply chain partners you can find in the world. They're phenomenal. So the team collectively has built hundreds of megawatts. Volition was formed exactly for this purpose only 3 years ago, and it has taken us these 2 years or so to develop the relationships with the major brands in the industry to the point that now we have more backlog than we can manage because of the approach that we're taking. Challenges, this is a complicated business. And it's funny because my brother owns a donut shop called Bismarck Donuts in Orem. And I told him, I should have just got into the donut business with you. This is a complicated business. And so we have to manage the relationship with the community. That's where it starts. Then we have to manage the construction of a massive project. Embedded in that is supply chain and managing your schedules on when something may or may not be delayed and how that will not implode a project, but push a project out where the demand for this data space from Google or from a Fortune 500 company that may reside in our building, they want the space now. And so trying to keep them happy with the reality of a schedule is a challenge, and to say nothing about the massive capital-intensive nature of this business. So we work with capital partners all over the world who sit behind our design as debt and equity providers and partners in the project. So there's a lot of moving parts. But we have a phenomenal team, and we have great support. And wherever we build our first locations, they'll get built. They'll be great. They'll be great facilities.
And you have others, so wherever you build your first location, Spanish Fork, if this is approved, Spanish Fork would be your first location, or you have some others that are approved being built, or is Spanish Fork
There's
your-
there are probably 4 others that are in initial, what we would call pre-engineering, pre-approval. There's San Jose, California. There's we're looking at a facility potentially in Austin, Texas. So we're unique in that a customer, for example, a public company called Akamai, is working with us on a totally different, they've said, we're looking for 5 locations. So these are the regions. So we're with Akamai right now. We're working on finding appropriate locations. And most of them will end up being smaller than this. They'll be in the 25 to 50 megawatt range on our ongoing kind of national expansion. I think over the next 5 or 6 years, we probably will have 4 or 5 locations in Utah.
Okay.
Jeff, what are you actually planning on putting here? Is it GPUs exclusively? Are you talking about maybe a more traditional?
It's all high density compute.
All high density compute.
Yeah.
GPUs are going to be a major component of that.
NVIDIA, yeah. So,
Okay.
And the other thing that's of note, because it's a topic, we don't do any work for the U.S. government, and we don't do any work for anybody involved in surveillance, whether they are private or public.
Your main customer that's going to be here for this product, I'm just inferring, but are we talking Anthropic or OpenAI at some point?
Neither of those are in play for this building now. We've had conversations, but there's no OpenAI or Anthropic planning to come into this building.
Who you're talking about? Or
I wouldn't get into the details. I can't.
Yeah.
But I can answer that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Capital investment. I mean, we're talking huge dollar amounts.
Mhm.
You have this lined up,
Yes.
and who are these? I don't know what you can disclose, but I'm obviously going to ask as much as I can ask on that.
Oh, yeah.
Because I mean, that's what makes I say it like in this day and age, this is a race, right? This is a competition. It's an international competition. It's a competition between hyperscalers and everyone. And there's a lot of money that's driving this market. We literally had the highest value of the Dow 2 or 3 days ago, based in large part on this sort of I don't know if I'd call it speculation, but I mean, are you financed? Right?
We're capitalized. So we have local partners, but I have a long history of capital relationships, primarily in Manhattan. So if you know who Jefferies is, they're a major, one of the leading bankers in the world. They are our primary kind of broker, our investment banker, and they take our project into a wide range of capital markets that specifically fund in the billions into data center infrastructure. So that's how we're backed.
I'll make one comment about what you said about reaching out to the community. I don't think that Sam Altman's or the Dario Amodei, this is Anthropic and OpenAI's, did much service towards AI as being, I don't know, from a public relations perspective.
I agree.
Us all, they were explicit that this is going to take away jobs, that all this automation is going to make it so we can do all sorts of things, but the primary thing was going to actually take away jobs. I think they've changed their tune quite a bit, because I don't think that's played out particularly well for them. I guess I just want to make this comment, and you've made this as well, and if you have any other comments on this. When you were talking about before 2022, that's really when the world changed, right? That's when we had generative AI, and that's when GPUs went from, I don't know, being video game providers or Bitcoin miners to actually providing generative AI, which is something I'm sure many of us here have used, and is really where all this value is coming from. Once that changed, the fundamental mechanics of data centers were entirely different. The power consumption, the reason why, I think even the reason for you doing what you're doing has changed to that, just because generative AI requires a lot of electricity. And so I think I think there can be a lot of misinformation out there, but at the same time, like, you are, for lack of a better term, a pioneer here. And pioneering is, I would say, full of risk, full of unknowns. And perhaps the biggest thing I question, and again, I think you've done a great presentation here, but the biggest thing I question is the operational expertise to execute on this. That comes with time, that comes with experience, and that's something that I think even those who have this experience can struggle with quite a bit.
Yeah.
That's one of the concerns I have. So sorry, I kind of went off on a tangent there.
No,
but
that's okay. One thing that's hard to see is you get this little group of people coming in here. We're kind of, we're off out here in Utah. We're not in the center of so many things. However it's occurred, our little company happens to be at the center of all of the major companies that are involved in this industry. So for example, our architecture, our design happens in concert with, for example, the NVIDIA team. So when you look at conversations around, we're going to put 250 megawatts of Bloom, and nobody has done that yet. But what you do have behind that is a whole industry that has spent several years validating Bloom, testing it, its workload capacity, and you now have every company in the world puts their stamp of approval, meaning if you say to NVIDIA, and NVIDIA will be a part of our building, that we're going to build 25 megawatts, 100% powered by Bloom, they say, we're in. So while this is, we were one of the earliest groups in with Bloom saying this is what we want to do. Now there's a bunch of people doing something similar, but we were having this conversation many years ago. And so the industry has fully validated the fact that these fuel cells run on what we call a 5.9 reliability. That means that they're running 99.999% of the time, and they have been doing so for over 10 years in a variety of environments. So I'm just letting you know
Smaller
that we have
you really would be, if I mean, again, let's see who gets there, but what you're talking about, if you could execute and deliver in a year or two, you'd be a pioneer in this.
well, we are.
Absolutely. And so I'm
No,
just
we're
saying, yeah.
we're small, but we're leading in the industry. There's things happening that will cause our little company to be known worldwide. Where Fortune magazine is doing an article on us right now. So we're kind of unknown, but we're soon not going to be. And I think part of that is just because we have really great partners that we're tied to so that we can execute this well. When it comes to like the long-term operation, again, that's a scenario where initially we hire third parties that have been running the day in and day out monitoring of a data center, for 30 years. So there's nobody who will be new or elementary at any part of our operation.
I want to ask one more, and I could go on forever, so I'll try to stop here and let others speak.
Yeah.
But the one question I have that I've heard, heat. What sort of heat effect will this have? Could this change, like not emissions, but I'm actually
glad you
talking
brought it up because we
actual
meant to
heat?
hit it. If you'll go beyond where it says thank you, there's an appendix. Okay. So heat on this property with this technology is fairly complicated because we have heat coming off of the cooling. We have heat coming off of the fuel cell. We also integrate heat capture. So there's a whole lot of the heat that comes out of this system that never hits the atmosphere. We pull it directly back into our system. There's another part of our efficient design. We pull it right back into our system to actually power a portion of our cooling. So we have a combination of a whole lot of heat capture, but even in the most extreme scenario, the modeling shows that at the facility itself, so right on property, in max capacity, the temperature on that facility could be about 5 to 6 degrees hotter than just a quarter mile down the road. It is a benefit that we happen to be right where we have wind power. That wasn't by design. We just happened to find this building. But it is useful because the wind that comes off of that canyon radically decreases this even 5-degree increase. And when you start to look at what happens 500 feet outside of the facility, a quarter mile, half a mile, it's less than a quarter mile that not even a degree of additional heat. In a scenario where there's like a day where there's no wind, that's kind of the scenario where it would accumulate. So we are well within any expected range of heat off of any type of industrial facility. So heat is another topic that has been widely discussed without accuracy. To give you a comparison,
Is there any heat that could be generated from the emissions from your power generation? Is that part of the heat equation that we're talking about?
yeah, I mean, the balloon fuel cell creates heat. Yeah, that's the.
Amongst other, the cooling and so on and so
Oh,
forth.
yeah,
of the
yeah.
facility.
There are scenarios where right at the actual exhaust of heat, you're talking about over 400 degrees. I mean, that's how these systems work. And so, but in its cumulative use, and look at how it's used on the property, you're not going to see an increase of more than 5 degrees. And that is not the amount of, heat that's going to in any way affect the city of Spanish Fork.
What about a house like mine that's a quarter mile from this facility?
Quarter mile from the facility?
Correct.
You're looking at potentially on the worst day, you may see a degree different increase. But if there's any wind blowing, you don't have any increase. There's no increase.
So to be clear, it's not a zero impact.
No, I didn't say that it was.
Yeah. Even on the heat, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We're 5 degrees hotter on our property.
And could even affect neighbors like you.
Right, or Mike?
Yeah.
My question is, okay, I want to go back to natural gas.
Yeah.
Natural gas consumption, and how does that impact? I don't know anything about natural gas and the stores of natural gas that are available. Or is that a limited? Is that?
So natural gas is widely considered a cleaner fuel.
Right.
So you'll see some like fleets of buses sometimes, and they say powered by natural gas. So natural gas is widely considered as better than, petroleum, better than diesel.
Right.
But it's still not 100% clean. But it is dramatically cleaner. And that's why many environmentalists, many cities actively adopt things like a natural gas burning, like I said, a fleet of buses or other vehicles.
Right. Is it a limit? My question is, so I heat my home with natural gas and my hot water and et cetera, and so is natural gas a limited commodity, a limited resource?
Yeah, natural gas in the state of Utah, natural gas use for residences and businesses is completely and totally bifurcated from where we would draw natural gas from. So there is literally not a scenario where our natural gas use could have any impact on the city of Spanish Fork.
Can we click a little closer on that? So are you pulling from a different pipe infrastructure or something? Or you said you will pay for the capital upgrades.
We upgrade from a main.
That main would still feed us here in Spanish Fork for winter.
But the city has an allocated usage that is subsidized and cannot change in price. So that is.
But you're still affecting the actual marketplace for this.
We're not. Yeah, the amount of natural gas available in the U.S. infrastructure, our use, even though it's a lot, has literally no impact on market economics.
Let's assume Bloom's power generation's very successful. As we go forward, I mean, honestly, like
in a decade, could there be an impact? Of course.
Yeah, you get where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like if we're talking about power generation for this style, I'd want to turn, and I think Dave mentioned this before. There's a power generation project in Nephi, similar technology, right? Wouldn't we want to do this for everything? I think we would. And all of a sudden, it might be a natural gas supply constraint instead of the electric.
I would encourage you to, because Paul, I know you dig into stuff, so I would actually encourage you or any of you to maybe just search on this a little bit, and you'll see that when you compare the U.S. grid, its age, its strain, the entire grid is a very scarce resource, and that has been an accumulation over decades. Natural gas is massively more abundant throughout the entire U.S. There has not been a huge draw. That's why it's always been quite cheap, quite affordable. And there's so much natural gas available that it will take, a 3x or more increase throughout the U.S. to begin to see what will be an incremental change in natural gas. Now, see, we hedge against that and we buy our rate over, and we don't want it to go up, but it doesn't move the way utility does, and there's not a pass-through to consumers, especially in Utah, the way there is with utility power.
So you'll be buying your natural gas from Enbridge months in advance. You're going to watch price and you're going to buy it.
Yeah, we lock in.
Way before, and lock in the price way before you use
Yeah.
it. Similar. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, what do you see, say, supply shortages and everything goes crazy and you can't get everything in that? What would be the downside? I mean, say we approve all this, Spanish Fork moves, you go forward, come to Spanish Fork, go forward, and everything falls apart in a couple of years. Is there a downside to Spanish Fork? Is there going to be a cost to the Spanish Fork?
No, I don't think so. I think what you're looking at is, instead of a 250 megawatt facility that has a $4 billion value and a $40 million tax implication, we could be sitting with a 75 megawatt facility that has $1.4 billion in value, and Volition would have a whole bunch of extra space in that building that we never fully utilized. But the model for us still pencils very well. So the cost of the building and the potential of having it not fully occupied is a very small line item on our P&L. So even if we were sitting with a building that we didn't fully end up utilizing, and we had 25, 50, or 75 megawatts there, it would still be a very healthy business model.
If you were operating at 50% capacity, you're still going to make a profit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Let me put that a different way. If I have 250 megawatts of capacity and that whole capacity is only running at 50%, that's not good for us. But we contract in a way that we know that the client will be moving up to 70% or more into the facility.
So you're going to be contracted for 25%, another 20 to one contractor, contract, 40% to another contract as you build out. You're not going to build out 100% and then try to sell.
Well, we know that just this client will take all of the capacity that we can provide. But what I'm getting at, Dave, is that if there was a supply chain issue and we just couldn't get the cooling and the fuel cell, then our design would be halted at what we could build. So we'd be stopped at 52 megawatts, 48 megawatts, 70 megawatts, and our client would be mad.
And they wouldn't be able to go anywhere because it's a supply chain and nobody else could.
Yeah, everybody will be in the same boat.
Okay. So my biggest reason for going there is just to see if there was a risk to Spanish Fork City, but
Jeff, can I comment on that?
Please.
We would be very, very concerned if there was a large power user, even a fraction of what we're talking about here, that wanted to tie into the system and have capacity in the system dedicated to it, power infrastructure dedicated to it, and that type of a thing, that type of really expensive investment that does have a cost to us as a power provider. If it were that kind of a scenario, we'd be looking to have financial guarantees and that type of a thing to protect the city as the provider of that utility. One of the things that's distinct from this group and other people that we've talked to that we have not been able to really get off square one with is the idea that they don't connect to our power utility. That really removes as best as we've come to understand, really any risk to the city for what they're talking
That's
about
what I'm
doing
getting,
here.
yeah. That's what, from what I've listened to tonight, that's what I see.
Yeah.
I don't see the city being on the hook for any risk. They're not committed to sell X power. They don't have to upgrade your power system, anything. They don't have to put in a new substation, nothing.
Yeah, the Enbridge upgrade, for example, is a $14 million expense, and that's our expense.
And that's your expense through Enbridge,
We pay Enbridge.
nothing to do with the city.
We pay Enbridge directly for that cost of upgrade.
Could you comment a little bit on like I have colleagues and friends in Ohio and everything like that. Their rates going up. They've got data. They're huge. Why is it fundamentally different? Like you paying for the upgrades on Enbridge, whereas in other places, ratepayers are paying for upgrades to electrical infrastructure. Is it something? I got to assume there isn't any reason why, if you wanted to consume grid power, you couldn't just like,
We could
pay
go somewhere
for
and
it.
negotiate, yeah.
Yeah.
So number one, that's just not our model. We're not doing that.
Yeah, I get that. But why
I
is that
think
the
it's-
case? Just
I
help
think
educate us.
that's the case because they got away with it for a long time, and I think it's starting to change. Regardless of what you feel about an administration,
Yeah.
this change happening where the administration, it's interesting because we were already saying it, but now they're saying, hey, you have to bring your own power. That's a massive shift. So now even the hyperscalers are having to find ways to produce on-site power. Many of them will use natural gas, and many of them will go to a bunch of diesel. So they'll still be having big emissions problems. But this is changing, and utilities are getting more and more pushback about just pushing their rates through to the residents. So I just think they got away with it for a long, long time.
A lot of those are also asking for tax incentives and whatnot.
Yeah.
To bring their plant in.
Yeah, they look for every little margin that they can. Our model and my intention in this model, even though, for example, we happen to have a federal tax incentive that lets us write off some of our power generation equipment, my intention always has been to make sure that our business model works without any federal or local incentives. To me, if your company can't run without incentives, you don't have a good business model. So we get a benefit right now of a little bit of a federal, rebate, but our model will operate without that when it ever, changes, and it will someday.
Can I ask, you go first.
No, I'm ready to
Okay.
make motion here.
Yeah, I guess my one comment is I appreciate that, well, number one, this is a very compelling business model, business solution to a lot of problems. And it's really compelling and really awesome if it succeeds. I appreciate that that there's a development agreement and a Title 15 amendment that protects Spanish Fork City and community, environment, etc. I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah.
I dove deep on this. As you see, I heard that you talked to the Provo Planning Commission about this. Provo passed an ordinance to basically ban anything over 50 megawatts. But one thing I thought was interesting, I don't know if you can comment on this, is they were also proposing requiring data centers to be grid connected. What was that? And I know there's some connection to the Utah Municipal Power Authority, which we in Spanish Fork are. What's the situation?
Well, I just think the situation is that the leadership of Provo just doesn't want to have a data center in Provo.
Why did they want to keep it grid connected? That was one thing that I think you were.
Well, because if it's grid connected, it limits the amount of any real capacity to be developed in Provo. Provo can't stand up anything more than maybe a few megawatts if somebody wanted to build a data center there. So we had interest, primarily just because we're currently based there. I live there. We identified a couple buildings that would work. They made a proposal to ban certain things. I came to the city council and made a very strong argument about why it's beneficial to Provo to look at this kind of a model. And between the time that I made that proposal and the time that they came back to reconvene, we never submitted an actual request to build there. We identified other buildings that were more attractive. Stockman Flats, this building that we're contemplating, a few others that were just better locations. So there was no reason for us to, try to have a battle with Provo about doing it differently if they were not wanting that. There are many places we can go, just like this. Like we would love to be here, but we don't have to be here. If it doesn't work out, it'll be okay.
But
we'll build in other places.
Is the main draw to Spanish Fork the building?
It's a phenomenal building. That's my attorney. That's our corporate attorney, who is a hardcore
Who was like, "No
cowboy,
no
and
outbursts,
all he
thank
thinks
you."
about is the rodeo. And then he'll sit in the back of a city meeting and just yell out the word rodeo.
World
So
famous now.
We're very proud
Post
of our
Malone
rodeo.
got us on the
Yeah.
map.
Yes.
All right. Okay, Paul, how are we doing? Are you ready for public hearing?
Oh, yeah, I'm ready to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Shauna, one thing.
Yes.
I appreciated the feedback. I don't know you, but I commend you for the feedback that I heard yesterday and tonight on your service. And I did take note that apparently you know how to handle belligerent people in this setting. And I made a promise that I would not do anything belligerent so that Shauna would not take me out.
Thank you. Well,
But
you
thank
did.
you.
You heard a little bit of that tonight, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate you. All right, and let me just say for the record, at the beginning when I said I'm so excited, it's just I love to learn about new things. I had no agenda coming in or no preconceived ideas about what was being presented. So, okay, that's just for the public record. All right, we will have a public hearing. Remember, 3 minutes each. Come to the front, and each person allowed to speak only once, and state your name and address for the record, and all the other things.
Dan Davis,
Hello, Dan.
how you doing?
Great.
Hey, you control a crowd good because it's really hard for an ornery person to get ornery at somebody that's smiling at you.
Good. We'll all keep smiling.
Okay, so first of all, is Volition public? Are they a public traded? Private, okay. Boy, that's something to think about, isn't it? Dan Davis, I'm employed, or I'm self-employed here. I like the idea. I think the building's a good use. They've solved the water problems and the heat. Sounds like the heat situation that's one thing I had a question about was that Spanish Fork, property tax, not necessarily much else. So there's a difference there than what's already there with the trucking. Island should mean islanded forever. So if the gas prices do change and there's some caveat that where they go after public gas, then that means that could be a problem. So right into the ordinance that any future interconnection requires full public reapproval. Third, this is a big one. Space data centers are a big hit right now. Elon talks about them a lot. Dyson Swarm being placed right now around the Earth. Orbital, a company, has filed for 100,000 orbital slots. Elon Musk is somewhere up in that area. LEO type satellites where they're easily exchanged after they reach their life is a real serious thing. Across the country, over 120 billion in data center spending has been moved off company balance sheets in 18 months into entities specifically designed so that the parent can walk away. The Bank for International Settlements, a central bank, just named this one as the biggest risks to global financial stability. The computers inside depreciate in 3 to 5 years. It should last 30. Finger Hut came in offering 520 jobs, spent the money, then it didn't work out, so take that into account. How much time have we got? Man, I can yak. So I just say, take all those things into account so Spanish Fork doesn't get bit if this goes south, because data centers, it's kind of a shell game. Orbital data centers the tech will get worked out. Land-based terrestrial data centers will stay, and there will be a transitional period until the tech reaches for orbital. But orbital is, in my opinion, and I think it's the way to go. No batteries, rejection into space. That tech's getting worked out. The V3 rocket's already launching things, and other people are launching things to prep for that. And they'll PEZ dispense those satellites out, and it'll become a Dyson swarm. And so think about that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Appreciate that.
Hi, I'm Megan Banks. I grew up here my whole life. I actually lived right at the mouth of the canyon, grew up right there. I strongly am against data centers, and all of that sounded well. I think, honestly, I don't trust it. I think it's for the rich to get richer. I'm highly against even the small amount of environment with the heat that we have right now and all the fires going on is a very big concern for me. And I hope there's some protests against this, honestly. So that's what I got.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Megan.
Alan Westman. I've been a longtime resident of Spanish Fork. And I attended the city council meeting last night, so a lot of this presentation was familiar to me, and I've sent some questions the way of the Volition folks and appreciate their engagement. There is a lot that they've presented that on its face seems compelling and is plausible. There are some things that I have concerns about. The thermal output, the heat, is one of those. As these computer chips consume energy, they're doing some useful work with the electrons, pushing them around in patterns and in interesting ways, but then that energy becomes heat. And there's no moving parts, there's no mechanical, there's no other place for that energy to go except for heat. And although they talk about having heat recovery technologies that allow them to be more efficient in the amount of power they consume, that heat consumed by those chips still has to go somewhere. 250 megawatts of power translated into heat is, to me, not a light industrial use. And so, speaking to the amendment that is before you, I feel that it is improperly sized. This should be and I should qualify that. Depending on the scale at which they operate, how many megawatts they are consuming and megawatts of heat that they're producing, it seems like there needs to be a threshold stated in this amendment that says this is light industrial and now this is heavy industrial. Because we're talking something on the scale of a power plant. Flaming Gorge Dam produces 150 megawatts of energy. The Gatsby Power Plant in Salt Lake City on North Temple, if you're familiar with that, near the state fairgrounds, that is 350 megawatts. And so we're talking something in between that, on that scale. That is the amount of heat that will be produced. I don't necessarily buy there will be a minimal amount of heat noticed. I think that heat will also be apparent even when wind is blowing, because there will be a plume of heat directed whatever direction that wind is going. So I would urge the commission to maybe take a moment and ask for the legal team to go back and include some provision related to heat output, because that to me is one of the critical emissions that is not mentioned or accounted for in this. Thank you.
John Sumption. You said you had a lot of background, and it sounds like a good niche. Why isn't everybody else going down this path? To me, it sounds too good to be true. If I believe you, And why isn't Anthropic, OpenAI, Oracle knocking down doors, walls, buildings to get it independent of you? Another question about finances. Hypothetical 5-year depreciation cycle. That means quick depreciation and correspondingly quick tax revenue decrease. In addition to that, is there any city revenue from purchase of your services? I don't know, that wasn't stated. How do you contain the noise pollution? What are the mechanics of that containment? What are the frequencies of the noise? Is it high-pitched? Is it low-pitched? How far does it travel? The noise regulations in the thing I saw on the screen said 65 decibels at the site, 55 decibels at the nearest residence. Based on what you said, it sounds like it would be much lower. Why isn't the regulation match what you say about how much noise, correspondingly lower level of noise? You said no work for U.S. government, no work for private or public surveillance. What about when you change your mind? What control do we have if we don't want that kind of workload in Spanish Fork? You said the natural gas turns into water. Sounds like a great chemical reaction, fuel reaction. Where does that water go? Is there any benefit to using that water inside Spanish Fork for irrigation or whatever else? What inspection regimen do you commit to for accountability and enforcement on heat, water, and noise?
Thank you. Appreciate that.
My name is Rod Yelm. I live in the neighborhood east of Larson Elementary, and I've lived here for nearly the last 20 years. But I came to be ornery. I'd seen the I'd seen the post the Spanish Fork made. I appreciated the transparency on that, and I noticed that 80% of the people that reacted to that were angry about it. And I came largely because of so many concerns of data centers and other places. And I have changed my mind. Paul, I couldn't ask for somebody to have asked more tough questions than you have tonight. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate you. And you didn't give an easy interview to Jeff back here. And I had a great conversation with Curtis, another one of the representatives in the hallway earlier. If everything is true, I'm a fan. I'm a big fan. I think they would be a great asset in Spanish Fork if everything pans out and if everything stays transparent. I love what I've seen so far, and I want that maintained. I want you to keep them to their word, and I will be too. That's all I have to say.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much. That's one of my principles that I learned in Planning Commission is be willing to listen and change your mind if you need to. Good job. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Carla Shade. I live near Maple Mountain High School. I am not fundamentally opposed to AI data centers or any data center, but I would like to ask you to exercise caution as you move forward with regard to this data center and future data centers, because the amendments not only apply to Volition, which appears to be a dreamy data center that we all would like versus a hyperscale data center, but our health and environment are sacred, and no community should be forced to sacrifice clean air, clean water, or safe homes for a commercial enterprise. And I don't speak to the integrity of this company. We have numerous examples nationwide where promises were made and then broken. Wastewater was returned to city sewers, larger buildings than planned, unauthorized energy generators, large amounts of heat released, and sound levels promised and exceeded. They made promises, just like we're getting promises here today. We need a way to be able to have enforcement of guardrails. I appreciate the amendments that you put in and the research that you have, but I think you're right that a contract would make these things more enforceable in the future, not only for this data center, but future possible data centers as well. This company, as they mentioned, has no current data centers or a history or a track record that we can look at. This is basically all mostly conceptual. I mean, they've done the research, they've done the engineering, but something like a community benefits agreement or contracted entered into by the data center developer and Spanish Fork could ensure that the developer provides measurable, enforceable items and guardrails for the community and our host environment. So I would ask that you exercise caution and remember that we're not just dealing with Volition that seems to make all these promises, but then future data centers because of the right to build. That I would like to see measurable guardrails, enforceable guardrails in place so that we can protect our community and the resources that we all value. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm writing down your words. Okay, who'd like to come speak next? All right. Seeing that there's none, we'll close our public hearing and we'll have a discussion and questions with the commission. Let's just go down the row.
First, I want to go to lunch with Paul so he can explain to me
Right?
what he even said. I think my biggest concern is this seems to be happening so fast, which I get, but there's just so much that I don't have a clue and understand. And I know we have meetings set for the public. I'd like to kind of see how they turn before I start making any promises in this.
I appreciate the discussion. Thanks. I grilled you with a lot of questions, and but I think it's appropriate. And I'll actually say for the citizens, I think we had some excellent feedback. If you go look at the dialogue online, it's nowhere near what we heard here, and I absolutely appreciate the feedback from every citizen here who spoke. It was good feedback. I guess I'll go back to what kind of the theme that I had here, and it's not that I had a preconceived notion. I saw our agenda. I literally looked at it yesterday after work, and then I spent a lot of time going down this stuff. And a lot of this stuff is stuff I'm aware of as well. But we're living in a world that has unique events happening right now, very much related with artificial intelligence. So this is just directly why we're having this discussion here. I'm just going to say I'm not inclined to support this right now. My main concern is this is a pioneering effort. I get that Spanish Fork does some very unique things here. We have SFCN, our internet provider that is excellent, that's unique with everything else. We have, I would say, very much a world-class city that has put together a wonderful community here. I deeply feel like I'm not ready to experiment with something like this here in Spanish Fork. Not at this time. I get the world is changing so much. I get, at some point, with the rapid velocity that we're seeing with innovation and improvement, we may get efficiencies that make data centers at this point unnecessary. Or we may find, similar to the Dyson sphere comment, which is very science fiction, but also very, very much what we're looking at in terms of energy consumption, that we may continue to increase our energy consumption infinitely on into the future. With that said, I don't know that I want to experiment with that here in Spanish Fork right at this time. I will say, though, that if we do pass this, I think the comment for some thresholds here, even around the higher threshold, would be willing or would be pertinent to at least consider. So that's my thought.
very compelling presentation, learned a lot. I can see the potential benefits for the city and those that live around it, particularly some of the other uses that could be used in that building. I really appreciate, Paul, your engagement and your questions that you asked. That was very helpful to me. I do have a question for the city staff. With this potential agreement, it was not too long ago that we were talking about a different entity with very deep pockets, that the city would have an inability to defend, pursue, go through a legal process with an entity that has deep pockets. If this was approved and it goes forth and there's violations for the agreement, and we're talking huge amounts of money that most of us can't wrap our heads around, can the city, with your resources, really stand up to that kind of financing?
I guess
I have a thought, but
from as we talked about, from a legal perspective, it's best, your remedies are a lot better if you have a contractual agreement than if you're just a code agreement. So the fact that they were willing to enter into a development agreement makes it a lot more feasible for us to try to enforce or to take on a company of whatever size than if we're just.
Okay, thank you. And I'll also echo the sentiments. I appreciate how transparent this has been. I love that you have open houses coming up. I am leaning towards, I feel it's a little premature. I'm not opposed to the project, but with the discussion and the points that Paul made, I feel like it's a little bit premature, particularly that there's no model. This hasn't been done before. They are pioneering, and I would say that my house is hot enough. I don't even want 1 extra degree temperature this summer. Okay, I think maybe I'm a Pollyanna, and I really appreciate Paul's expertise and words tonight. It kind of opened my eyes a little more. I've already said that I appreciate that there will be a contractual development agreement. I appreciate the willingness of Volition to enter into that in good faith. I too feel like if this is true and this really works, then it really could be an asset to the entire industry. Somebody has to start. It seems like what's happened here protects Spanish Fork, and I appreciate knowing that Spanish Fork that there have been other data centers that have wanted to come into Spanish Fork, and Spanish Fork has said, not here, we're not doing that here. Like, they're looking to protect Spanish Fork. And that this is a very different thing than other data centers. I appreciate how open you are and willing to have the conversations until 11:30 plus at night, and have done 8 months of work already with Spanish Fork City. I am a supporter, and I think that I would feel good about supporting the text amendment and then letting the city council continue to discuss that. I really would love it if there was a way to really publicize these open houses, because there's a lot of people that have a really bad taste in their mouth about data centers. You say that word and you put it on social media, and everybody is like, heck no. And I think you come and have a conversation, and you keep having conversations, and there will be reasonable people that ask really good questions honestly, and can see that this is not like other data centers, and then make some decisions. I don't know what to say about the heat. I live right there. I work out at my house too. We love our Spanish Fork wind at our house. It's a gale. We love it. So I don't know what to say except for that I think that I would support trying.
Okay, I want to thank Jeff. That was an excellent presentation. I think I'm a lot like our good friend Rod here, who had his mind changed today. And I'm excited about this, and being a pioneer doesn't scare me. I think this town and this city and this state was built by pioneers. But I am very cautious. We need to have some serious transparency, and that the contract, I think, is going to be the kicker there. And I appreciate your willingness to enter into that. I'm excited. I'm excited to see that happen. I think this is a good thing, and I feel like Spanish Fork is being protected on every angle that they can be protected. And so I'm on board.
All right. Thank you for all the effort you put in and answering all the questions. That it was really good presentation. I'm in favor. I look at, there's many of the questions you say the heat, the effect of the heat. Okay, we have parking lots in this town that increase the heat that much. Costco, Macy's, Walmart, Lowe's, all that up there, that whole shopping center. They increase the heat also. It's a new technology. It's exciting. I like the pioneering aspect of it. The Spanish Fork City is not going to be on the hook for a lot of infrastructure development, any at all, to my understanding, which I like. And this amendment, the difference between this amendment at this time to Title 15 and the one we dealt with a few months ago is that one we buried our head in the sand to give the entity coming in free rein to do what they want to do. This one, we are holding them to certain conditions, tight conditions. They're legally binding in a contract, and I like that. And so, I'm for it. I'm not worried that it's new technology or anything. This city was built by pioneers, and I'm excited for it, so I'm in support.
All right, any other questions for staff? Somebody saying you want to add any kind of?
Oh, I had one more thing I wanted to say.
Sure.
As far as the water consumption goes, I have a suspicion that they'll probably use as much water on their landscape, the required landscaping around the building, as they're actually going to use in the building, as long as all his numbers are correct.
All right. Any of the concerns that have come up that Dave could answer off the top of your head, and then we could have. Oh, and Jeff can come and talk with us too. Sure, come on up. Mm-hmm.
Just real quick, maybe to the three of you, I appreciate that there's some pioneering going on here, but I don't feel like I made it clear enough that the Bloom fuel cell has been running for over 15 years, over 500,000 units in a variety of natural gas settings on properties all over, like a whole series of Costco. Now, these are powering portions of industries. In the last 4 years, they have made a major entrance into data centers, Equinix, huge deployments. Now, in the last 2 years, you have over what will be 3 gigawatts of power that have been purchased now by the most dynamic, thoughtful technical companies and utilities in the world will be now simultaneous with us deploying over 5 gigawatts of power just in the next 24 months. So that is a large, large swath of investors, decision makers who have vetted this system for over 15 years. So I just want to make clear that Bloom is operating in a wide range of scenarios all throughout the world. The cooling is not new for us. Our team just built this exact closed-loop cooling for NVIDIA, for Oracle. So I just wanted to stress that, yes, we're pioneering in the sense that Volition happens to be the first one who has said, we don't even want to use the grid. We're just going to use all natural gas. Natural gas, the infrastructure, is more than 25 times more reliable than the grid. It doesn't go down. So we feel like the risk is modest in the design, and we feel like failure for Volition would mean that for some reason we only built 25 or 40 megawatts out there, and you would still benefit greatly. We would have some explaining to do to our investors, but that's the risk we take. So I just wanted to add that. And the other piece is, it is true that people are knocking down the door for us now. When I say that we're not housing OpenAI or Anthropic, that doesn't mean that we haven't had long conversations with OpenAI and Anthropic. At the end of the day, there's a financial decision to make about terms. So we know what we can get from a term standpoint in the marketplace. So if OpenAI, Sam Altman wants to get us to agree to pay, for him to pay us 30% less, we can say no to OpenAI because we don't need to agree to those terms. So there is a massive line of now people who are saying, we want to build our facilities this way. So those are just the extra little pieces. I do feel like allowing the city council to consider this is a worthwhile support. And I really don't think that we fall into a category of an experiment here. I think we've spent many years along with others doing our due diligence on this.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yep.
I want to bring up one thing. Again, thanks for the additional comments there. If we were, I still don't think I'm a yes on this, but I did like the suggestion that was made by Alan here for some sort of thresholds, because right now it sounds like, you could really be at any size here. I think crawling into this instead of sort of, running at a pace I think it's prudent. The pioneering aspect, it makes a lot of sense. We have a pioneer heritage here. But we also don't hear so much about the failed experiments that happen as much. And that's the concern I run to. Anyway, so I'm saying, if we can add some language, I don't know if there's some feeling up here that there would be any more thresholds we want to add, if that's not necessarily what we're looking at. I don't know, is there any interest amongst this, throw out some numbers or something like this, step into this? I think I saw, Dave, last night you had some thresholds you were sort of considering. Was that correct, or was it somewhere else?
I've had a lot of thoughts over the course of the past few days, and the several hours now that we've spent talking about this. So I'm not sure that I know exactly what you're referring to.
Yeah, I'm thinking, you can build up to 250, even if that's what's being asked for. If you go beyond that or something like that. And I'm not saying this just for threshold's sake or something like that, but it's like, to the point that was made here, if we sort of open this up and this is, not conditional use, well, Volition may or may not succeed here, but we've sort of opened us up to, hyperscaler, whoever comes here.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. But I'm saying, do we want to have any guardrails up here?
If they come here, they'd be on conditions.
Correct. I'm saying, but do the conditions, do we want to say there's a maximum size you can build out? Or do we not want to say that?
Do you mind if I just share
go ahead.
a perspective? I think I'll even say representing staff.
Yeah.
And I appreciated what you said. I think it was one of the first things that you mentioned tonight about thresholds. We're talking about 250 megawatts for this project. And I'll take that a step further. It has not been uncommon for us over the years when we have a new idea that gets presented to the city to write law, zoning language that's tailored pretty tightly to the particular details of a use or idea.
Yeah.
A lot of the effort that both the applicant and our legal folks have undertaken to draft the proposal that's before the commission tonight really has been to try to say, hey, we're going to take this step here that can be undertaken if this set of really tight conditions is met. And I say really tight, that's my opinion. I think it really is a tight set of conditions. I completely appreciate the value in saying, along with thou shalt not incorporate, or otherwise maintain the capacity to produce more than a certain amount of power. Given what we're talking about here, having that threshold included to this language to say no more than 250 megawatts, that certainly aligns with what I think we as staff are really trying to work with the applicant to do, which is to compartmentalize this as best as we can. And I appreciate what's been mentioned a few times in terms of this being a change to the city's code, which does mean that potentially other people with properties in similar situations that are willing to meet the same criteria, they'd be eligible to do that. But certainly capping it at 250, that lines up really with what we're trying to do as staff.
I guess the other threshold I'm concerned about is heat, right? And so I think that I'd be willing to recommend this to City Council with the caveat of considering threshold capacity and have one more consideration about heat. Or you can tell us about things that you've considered about heat.
This is the first conversation, frankly, where we've really talked about heat in terms of degrees and something that's quantifiable.
I mean, 5 degrees doesn't sound like that much, or even 1 degree doesn't sound like that much, but it is.
It really is, and it's a real thing. And I'm not familiar with data centers, and more importantly, maybe fuel cells and the kind of heat that they generate. But I mean, you go back 30 years, and the concept of urban heat islands and how impactful they can be on communities, which simply, usually it's the result of a lot of asphalt.
That
Unshaded asphalt and that type of a thing.
Right.
I've read enough about that I know that it's certainly not uncommon. And I'm just saying this to provide some perspective. And Commissioner Woodhouse said it well. You get 4 or 5 acres of asphalt, and it's very likely that in a micro setting, that's raising the temperature more than 5 degrees.
One thing I'd like to say, and I think it's pretty clear here, that this would, we'll see what happens, but this would be one of the largest build here. We don't operationally know what that means. Even when we make the claims, it's theoretical until you actually run the program. And I think with it being theoretical, it would be prudent for us to put some guardrails in place. Because, as much as this is pioneering, and pioneering is a great thing, you can't understand what actually happens until you try it, until it happens. And then you see operationally what happens. That's with anything. And, I won't claim to be an expert on the Bloom Energy, but we're gonna figure out what happens once we run at that scale. If it's not you, someone will figure it out. And when that happens, there's potentially unforeseen consequences. For us to know what those consequences look like, the only thing I think that's helpful is put guardrails and checkpoints. If it was as simple as us coming back to a meeting and saying, hey, 250 works great, let's bump it up to 500 or something like that. We have another hearing like that, right?
And come back for another text amendment.
Well, honestly.
But let's see what happens when we actually run the experiment. I don't mean to say experiment, when we're actually operationalizing this, right? It's like all the traffic stuff we discuss. We can talk left and right about what it means when we approve new developments, but as soon as we get the house and the high school and all that stuff in there, we see what the traffic actually looks like, and we see if our projections were real. That's when the rubber meets the road, because that's what really happens.
Absolutely.
Right?
Let me just point blank. Adding a 250 megawatt cap to the language, is that palatable? Does that seem like that's a good step to take? That's what I'm taking, or that's what I'm understanding.
Is that palatable, Jeff?
Well, yeah. Couple things just operationally to consider. The land only requires, we can only go so far on this land.
Because of the size.
Because
of
of the
land.
size, right?
Yeah.
You can't put a gigawatt out there. There is a chance in our final engineering that we might not be able to power 250. It might turn into 180. It might turn into 160. The other aspect is that we have to overbuild on the property. So there is for 250 megawatts, we may require a cumulative of approximately 350. So my request, because of backup power on site, also potentially, if we know Bloom works well, where we have risk with Bloom is if in year 4 their output is 10% lower than we expected it to be. There could be a scenario where we would need to increase Bloom on site to make up for any degradation. So our request would just be that if you put a cap, we would probably request that the cap is 500, just in case we had to add anything to make up for efficiency degradation over time. And there is a scenario where we actually in engineering may not even be able to produce what we're proposing here. It might be somewhere, we know it'll be over 150. But those are just a few things to consider from an engineering standpoint that we would, if we're going to make a change, we would request that the cap would be probably 400 or so that any extra buildup to make sure we're producing the power we're committed to producing, because the fuel cell could drop off in output, that's our only request.
And Jeff, I really appreciate that comment right there. Because as you walk through this, you're kind of saying you're going to see some operational things
sure.
over time.
Yeah.
And I think it really speaks to my point there. I don't think any of us really know the number, but I appreciate you even coming back, operationally you may have to have threshold, and this may be a 2x or, 1.8x threshold, or whatever it is, right? But I think you're echoing exactly what I'm saying. It's like you're going to figure it out as things you will figure out when you're running it.
Yeah, and we support a cap. I just want to be sure there are details in the engineering that we haven't needed to get into, but that's one of them as we contemplate backup power and having space on site. If there's some degradation in performance, then we will be obligated to the client to increase our ability to stay at, if the agreement is 200 megawatts, for example.
Is that, are those numbers that?
Ryan has something he has to say. Say it.
Yeah, so there's two ways we can look at it. So there's nameplate capacity. So that's how much of potential, say, units that are on site. But then there's the delivery of power. So any power generation facility will have an excess amount of nameplate that then goes to what is actually going, let's say for a grid-tied system, a power plant here in Lakeside, right? That has a higher nameplate than what's actually being outputted every day.
Yeah.
So that's where the numbers shift here. So to our customer, we're saying we will give you 250 megawatts worth of power, but that's going to require the redundancy and the degradation over time. So that nameplate capacity is what is not fixed.
Not fixed, right?
Yeah.
So if we gave a buffer there, and honestly, we'd recommend this to the city council. We give a buffer. You guys go do some homework and figure out if the number makes sense. Maybe we throw in a buffer just to recommend it, and then you know, when the city council comes and looks at this, we've got time, there's discussions. I don't even think it has to be set hard, but a part of me is like, 400 sounds palatable. That might not be the right number that we even end on. That might not even make the most sense here, but we throw something out there as sort of a yardstick, and then we figure out if it makes more sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think making the point of the concept,
Yeah.
that you want a limit. You don't want the 2 or 3 gigawatt kind of thing, or, you know, at least
Well, you
And-
start somewhere.
put that off the
And
table.
I can say, our request, if we're going to do this, our request would be 500. We don't have to go pencil much more. We know pretty much that we're going to we would approach 400, and I think just as a buffer, that would be our request, so that we never risk having to ask for something again.
Although you get, you get something approved for 400 and then you see how things go, and it's actually a really good public opportunity to come back and say, this is how things are working at Volition, and we would request to have that, a Title 15 amendment, to have that threshold raised because of this reason. So in some ways, it seems like it would be good to have 400 and then come back later.
The challenge, Shauna, will just be that in pretty short order,
Yeah,
once we have the final specifics of the client's request, the full capacity, we already know that we'll have a nameplate need on site of more than 250. We will know the final amount pretty quickly, and I'm comfortable that it's going to be south of 500. It's going to end up somewhere in the 400s. So I'm just throwing out a number as 500. And we also know that property cannot support any, not a megawatt more than, it's impossible to build above 400 total megawatts of any useful backup or otherwise system on that property.
you can't do bigger. Okay,
Yeah,
that makes sense.
but I still think it's worthwhile we consider beyond that property too, because we're opening up the world. I know you guys want to compete and be running the, you know, but it's more than just that property. When we make these changes, I think I heard Congressman.
But you're talking about on a site, right? So for example, if we were successful together here and we began to build this building, and then we had a need and we knew that Stockman Flats had a really ideal location where we could build 100 megawatts. Would we be approved to do 100 megawatts in a separate location in addition to 250 megawatts sitting over at Canyon Logistics? Our understanding would be that, or if there was a cap of some sort, that would be specific to a location.
Well, then,
That's correct.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Yeah. There will be no other, I can assure you, there will be no other request from our company, I think anybody in the industry, to build anything larger than what we're contemplating here. There's just no scenario that works in this, in this area. And every other building, any request you would get from a total copycat of Volition would likely be a request for a data center that's 100 megawatts or less.
Okay.
Just based on existing buildings available.
all right.
But the innovation drive will come, right? If these fuel cells are wildly,
But they'll get smaller.
yeah.
So things will get smaller from here anyway.
I'm just saying, we got to see the future, but I think
Yeah.
the yardstick in place there. I think it's a reasonable discussion.
Maybe, and I really appreciate this discussion.
Yeah.
This is helpful. We tried maybe to author some adjustments here. Another thing that we talked, at least loosely, as staff about, and I think this is something we can execute on, the idea that there's a quota built into Title 15, that the city shall, can approve a certain number of these types of facilities.
We have a similar
That's-
sort of, I know we're not the entity here, but with the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Control, there's a quote on licenses for liquor licenses, right?
We have a quote on pickleball courts in a
We
certain
do?
part of the community.
What?
I think it's something like that, so.
And that's
So
important.
it,
Is that public knowledge?
it's in the code, you bet, yeah.
But,
We have a quota on parks too, don't we? In terms, or something like that, or at least a
It's kinda-
guideline. It's more of a guideline.
Yeah, so if that is helpful. I think that also aligns with the spirit
Yeah.
of
Pioneering.
this proposal, which is, through the vetting that we've done so far as staff, we're really comfortable with this, frankly. And I appreciate.
I don't know what numbers should be, but I think maybe even just, maybe we can even just throw a condition that we'd like you to develop what would seem reasonable. I think the numbers we talked about here probably sound reasonable. And I love the quota idea, too.
Okay.
And threshold.
So threshold on power.
Yeah.
In one respect or another. Byron just suggested, maybe it's output power, which I think, it's nameplate versus actual. So there might be a way to kind of get to the same point where you can make sure that you're delivering on contracts and yet.
And have enough backup on.
Because like we said in an earlier conversation tonight, we want people to be set up for success. You want to, give them the right tools and the right chance to be able to be successful.
But I think even at the same time, protections
Correct.
for the city. And I think of them as guardrails, too.
Yeah, correct, yeah.
Are there, so kind of focusing back to just those two things, kind of max size on power creation, thinking through and proposing at least a number of facilities that would be allowed. It may be anywhere in the city. And I'm thinking one or two, out of the gate. Are there other aspects, other metrics that
I think
come
just
to mind?
to go back and I understand about heat islands. It's probably okay, but I think if there hasn't been a robust conversation about heat, that it would be nice to have staff have a discussion about
deeper
it.
dive.
Yeah.
I think that'd be helpful for everybody.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think so.
Yeah.
All right. Well, with that, if there's no other.
So would we make a proposal for these sort of additions on there, or do we just kind of, we said what we said to you, and that's.
Trust you to take them to the city
course.
council.
Yeah, I'm sure they're listening, hopefully at 3x speed.
Depending on where you want to go, I'm definitely going to reiterate some things to make sure. It's your recommendation to the council, not what I'm saying.
So we could make a proposal that we add this on to whatever we approve tonight, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I would entertain a motion.
So I'll make a motion to add limits to the Title 15 change. I don't know the best way to word
Limits on power output.
Threshold on power.
The power output, Byron, whatever you said, that's what I want to kind of like. So that's the proposal. And then also a quota. We'll start with 2. And again, city council, if you're listening, come wordsmith these numbers to what makes sense. I know one of them is here as well, but that's what I'd say.
And a discussion about heat impact to the community.
I'll make a motion for that we add that to this. So
Are you recommending for approval with that?
Well, here's the
position?
thing. I'm not going to recommend for approval, but I want to add that on to what we're voting.
Okay.
Does that sound strange? Because I know that's kind of like me having my cake and eating it too.
Okay, no.
But that's
Okay,
exactly what I'm going to do.
So that's good. So with that, you've made a motion to add those to this, just to Title 15 amendments. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye. This is just adding this onto this.
Correct.
Okay.
Any opposed?
So we're voting on just adding, we're not voting on the thing?
Yeah,
We're voting on the thing next.
but I will be clear. I'm planning on voting against next.
No, I mean, I like what you're adding. I still think this whole thing is rushed. That's my whole
Yeah.
problem with it.
Yeah, that's okay. Okay. So did we vote? All in favor for adding those things to? There's
I think it
discussion.
was
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed?
I'll say no.
Okay. All right. So that passes with one dissent.
Did you vote, Madam Chair?
I support that.
Okay,
Yes.
Great. So 5.
the nay vote?
Commissioner Woodhouse.
Commissioner Woodhouse. Okay. Now I would entertain a motion on the Title 15 amendment.
Okay, I'll make a motion that we accept the proposed Title 15 amendment, data center and on-site power generation facilities.
recommended to the city council.
as recommended to the city council.
Do we have a second? Am I allowed to second? I'll second it. All in favor?
Yes.
All opposed?
Nay.
Nay, no.
Okay, what happens when it's a tie?
That's not a majority vote.
Right, so the motion fails, and so there's not a recommendation for approval that goes to the city council, but it still goes to the city council for their discussion. So the city council will hear what you've had to say and can consider it, but it's not a recommendation necessarily from the planning commission.
Okay, all right. And we'll look forward to your, thank you so much, Jeff, and your team, and we'll look forward to your open houses at the Spanish Fork Library next week. Thanks so much. And that's all for that item, and we have one more quick item with the Planning Commission, and that is we need to elect a chair and a vice chair since, and you guys can leave if you want, unless you really care about who's the chair and the vice
Or
chair.
do we do that now, or do we do it when the?
Do we wait until we have the new member?
We can do that when our
Oh.
new member
I'd
comes
certainly
in.
prefer that you do it tonight, so you're ready to go next
So you have somebody
If you don't mind
for
taking a
next
minute.
I just have a process question.
process question?
So does this go to the city council or not?
Yes, it
Yes.
goes to the city council.
And the city council can still make a decision on whether it proceeds or not?
Correct.
Yes. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
very
Appreciate the
much
Thank you.
discussion.
Okay,
Thank you, Jeff.